Welcome, everybody, to the Nutanix Weekly podcast. I neglected to look at the number before we started, so I'm going to do that right now. But I do have Jirah Cox with me. Jirah, how's it going?
Good, man. I mean, I think we let numbers define our life a little too much sometimes. It's an episode, right? That's all that's important.
Pretty much. No, it's funny when we don't have Andy here with us today, and whenever we don't have Andy, I always leave him something to make him feel like he has to be here, and in this case he does because I don't know the number. So let's see. I'm almost there, people. I'm almost there.
Andy's been called the king of the numbers. By
right.
At least one person has called him that just now. So
that's right. So all right, I can't find the number, but I'll find it. So today's podcast topic, as you guys can hopefully see my screen for those that are watching the video. If not, if you're just watching the podcast, this one is a blog post entitled Nutanix Unleashes Flow Networking to Streamline Hybrid Cloud Connectivity. And for those who don't already know, Nutanix Flow is their networking product that just got a super boost, I like to call it, from Nutanix .next this year. I keep doing that. I need to say .next. But this is their software-defined networking product that we've been talking through before on the podcast. But again, this has gotten a super boost for sure with some new features coming out of .next. Jirah, you want to give us a quick overflow on Nutanix Flow?
Yeah, man. So I like the way the article sets this up around, we start one foot in the pool of SDN, software-defined networking, 2018, right? Flow, microseg, focusing on security for VMs at the network level, right? Where we can, you can put in policies to restrict what your VMs can talk to or sources or what kind of traffic by port. Does unspeakably good things, right? Does wonders for limiting the spread of malware in your environment, right? Because it's got to get from one thing to another inside your environment, right? Called that east-west transit. And so that ability to hinder that movement is how we can actually put the brakes on malware. So this is kind of jumping into the pool with our second foot, I guess. It's probably written better than that. Our second pillar of SDN, right? For actual network virtualization, right? So flow networking is that. Let's go beyond that, right? Now let's get into how to actually create virtual networks, not just restrict the flow of packets on quote real networks, right? Where now subnets don't even have to be known or managed by the upstream top of rack switch. Now we can have like a virtual subnets, right? That we can wrap around our application and truly define the network at the software layer. So yeah, to your point, been in preview. It's been hiding in Prism Central down in a corner of the menu for a couple of releases now, I think. But now, super happy to say it's definitely GA as we announced at .next and as we can dive into more deeply here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jirah, by the way, I did find the podcast episode number. We are now on number 36. So how about that?
Oh man, I was so worried. 36, that's a good number. Listeners at home, sleep easy. It's 36.
That's right. So you talked through kind of an overview of Flow. Like you said, Flow networking is now GA, so generally available to all the Nutanix customers. So everybody listening to the sound of our voices, this is something that you should definitely be looking into and trying to figure out how it can help you. Overall, Jirah, as we kind of move through the blog post here, it talks about how Nutanix is taking a much more holistic approach to abstracting networks wherever everything is run to help basically move the traffic through for the different use cases. We've got a diagram here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but a diagram here, taking into account a VPC here, a bunch of the things that go into that a lot of times if you're not the networking admin, you don't get to play with some of these things. But for people, again, on the Nutanix platform, they've got the ability now to have a bunch of different skill sets, because you're managing everything potentially from one single pane of glass. So can you kind of talk us through some of these features and functions that are available to the public now?
No, totally. I love this diagram that kind of shows like, so what's in this release, right? So within this release for flow networking, right? Like you touched on VPCs, right? Saying this is going to be our software defined networking. Like this is the kind of data center. It can have subnets within it, right? But then how do I get packets into and out of that, right? What can I do with this thing that I now have? And a real common use case, right, would be like, I want to deploy a new app. The app has lots of components, right? It might have load balancers and front ends and app tiers and backend databases and analytics, VMs, and so forth. Users only have to get to one spot, right? That's all. The rest of it's all just sort of just plumbing. And so before this, right, for virtually any network, for any kind of virtualization deployment, or even physical deployment, actually, server deployments in general, I would have had to go get a whole bunch of IPs for every single part of that stack, right? If I've got 20 VMs, 20 physical servers, whatever, I got to go to the network team and get 20 IPs out of their allocation and put them on my stuff, and then put in DNS and all that good stuff. With this now, this is more, I would say it's more cloud-like networking, right? Where I just have my front door, I just have maybe the web interface, right? Running on 80 and 443 on a single IP on my real network. Let's say my corporate network is like 10.10.10. whatever. I can go and create a new little private network, like a 192.168.10. whatever. I can put all my stuff on there. I'm the boss of 192.168.10. This is great content, right? Describing subnets and IP addresses verbally, right, with broad hand gestures. But networking doesn't care. The network team and my customers don't care about my little 192.168.10 little walled garden, right? My little fenced-in area. They barely even know about it. I only need to get one IP address from the network team that I can then, NAT. All right, do network address translation, right? Like we all do at home, where we have our little 192.168.1 networks, and then the wild internet is something else entirely, right? We NAT, right, to get in and out of that. I can do that to get into my application. So now my 80 and 443, it comes from some 10.10.10 address on the network, right, where I tell my users go to this to get to this new application we deployed. But that really reaches my web server, and my web server can reach all the other aspects that it wants, right? The load balancers, the app tiers, the databases, analytics, whatever else is in my app, that can live in this little network specific for that application. So that means that my network management gets way, way simpler. When I need to add a new web host and add it to the load balancer, that's something that the real network and my users don't even know about, right? I have full autonomy to do that as the application or infrastructure admin at the VM level. So that's one of the coolest things, right? Is that sort of flexibility, that ability to limit who has to care about what and who do I have to go to get certain things to change as it grows over time. So within that, I can create subnets. We call out here, of course, the spec RFC 1918. But that just means all your 10 dot whatevers, your 172.16 dot whatevers, and 192.168 dot whatevers, your /24s, /16s, /8s. I can even still do ACLs to say what's allowed to get to certain stuff, right? I can still do those access control lists, and we even call out VPN connectivity here, right? So because how would I as a developer get into that little bubble and work on the database, right? When it doesn't have an IP address on my real network. Lots of ways I could solve that, but one of those is going to be, VPN connectivity to say I can connect my workstation to that bubble, work on the machines I need to work on, and then get back out of there, right? And those application servers, if they're not receiving that web traffic, I even like as a security aspect now, those things aren't even really reachable on the network, right? They can only get to what they need to get to. They're not just sitting out there on the wide open corporate network, hoping that no malware wants to come along and knock on the front door.
Yep. So now you said a lot of words. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to simplify what you said, and you correct me where I'm wrong. You ready?
I'm so ready.
So this is giving you the ability to make sure that you can assign certain network segments to certain people. And from a network admin standpoint, that person, as long as they've given you your, we'll call it a sandbox, even though sometimes it's not going to be a sandbox, but as long as they've given you your sandbox or your lane, where you can only, abide between these guardrails, then they're going to be happy from a security standpoint because they've taken care of that for you, right?
Yeah.
So
that's pretty fair.
Building upon that, if your guardrails need a bit of an exit to another subnet, they can control that as well. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, that's 100% true. But also, what if your little guardrails around your little walled garden, from a service provider standpoint, what if somebody else needed the exact same subnet and network that you've got, right? What if you were running a hosting environment and you had two customers that both needed to be, 192.168.100 at the same time? With traditional switches, you'd have a real problem there, right? But when they both have little pinholes to get out to your network, everybody's happy.
You got it. And I heard the voice of our fearless leader, Mr. Andy Whiteside, join. Andy, I didn't have the cameras showing because I always have an issue when I'm sharing my screen. But
no, it's okay.
Happy you joined.
Yeah, I jumped into episode 35, actually.
Oh,
so close.
Wow. Thank you.
And sorry for being late. My flight was delayed. I ran to get here as quick as I could. So
You're welcome.
Jirah, I'm glad you mentioned hosting and cloud, right? This gives companies their ability to have their own cloud-like networking layers. Harvey said the lanes that the network administrator gave you. I mean, basically, your minimal number of IPs, and from that point on, you control your destiny behind that wall, right?
Totally right. Yeah, you can do like application-specific networking that doesn't really affect the services you're offering out to the broader network, the broader company, right? So it limits that. Who cares about what?
Now, is this Nutanix's version of VMware's NSX? Is that a fair comparison?
Probably more fair to say they're both implementations of just sort of broader software-defined networking, right?
Mm-hmm. And for me, the challenge is when VMware first started doing this, I didn't understand why, right? The cloud wasn't really a real thing at this point, at least public cloud. And the idea that you would need networks inside networks and securing them and providing access to them in all kinds of different ways. I was like, okay, I got it, but I didn't quite get it. But now fast forward 3-4 years, and all of a sudden, to be a player in this space, cloud-enabled space, you need something like this as an option for your users.
I think it solves a broad range of problems, right? Like, I think to go back to sort of all of our roots, as mostly like we sort of do it all in our day jobs, right? But VM administration and DR planning is a large part of that. The biggest, the number one question we ask a lot of people when they're planning for DR failover is VM re-IP or move the subnet, right? Both valid strategies, both different kinds of pains in the butt, right? Different trade-offs with each one. And one of the huge possibilities I see from implementing software-defined networking is I can choose neither of those now. I can move the network with my VMs pretty easily, right? I can do lots of other things too. Yeah.
You move the whole thing, right? It's here.
Right.
Now it's here. And it's all there, all encapsulated. Encapsulated, I think, is probably a really somewhat applicable word.
Totally, right? So like, what kind of problems can I solve when I can offer like either self-service automation, like I need a new network for my app level of ease of use, or I have that level of portability. It at first pass, it can sound more complicating, but then it also is like, wow, but it actually can simplify a lot of my network design, right? If you've ever had that conversation around this subnet is full, right? We've exhausted this subnet. We're going to go start a new one.
No,
like,
never.
Right. I mean, hypothetically, if you had a customer that had that kind of pain point one day, maybe in the future, just think back. Jirah mentioned, think about SDN as a way to solve that problem. Maybe one day. That sort of simplicity, reducing complexity is that's, it's important to everybody.
Now, can you
All right. I guess that wasn't.
I wasn't sure if that was on my end or not. I'm so curious to find out what I can do.
Well, when it happened, like I'm looking around, like, wait, is that me? So I move around. I'm like, okay, I'm still moving, and so I'm looking. Okay, Jirah's still moving. I guess that was Andy. So going through the bulleted list here, you actually hit on the first two. There he is. We lost you there for a second, Andy. We heard "so can you," and then you left, and now you're gone again. So
all right.
Gotta love
try
it.
that.
There we go. I can hear you now.
Okay, I turned off my video.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sitting in an airport lobby. Can you adopt this after the fact? Or do you have to build from day one, or is this something you can blend into an existing Nutanix environment?
No, I've done it in the lab, right? It's a feature, right? You can just turn it on. Now, of course, at the individual VM level, right? Moving it out of like this network to that network, of course, you plan for that. And make those moves when they're convenient for you. But yeah, I've done it in the lab where I had, running workloads and was able to just sort of add this as a layer, right, as an offering on a running cluster.
I'm a EUC guy, Citrix guy, and grew up deploying provisioning services and having the ability to control my own destiny with PVS and have my own little pocket of a software-defined network would make that such a more controllable destiny than the legacy physical layers that we had to deal with.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, for sure, right? Because that there's already a real I'm going to say choke point. That's not the right word. There's already a gateway functionality, right, where all the EUC traffic traverses, like in that case, like a NetScaler, right? Mm-hmm. So I could set that up to have plumbing to traverse into my bubble, and then within that, like I could have my desktops live on one of these networks that could just grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. So Harvey, I didn't mean to jump in and disrupt you here. I don't know where we're at in the blog and reviewing it, so feel free to move ahead.
We're headed through some of these bulleted points here. The first two Jirah kind of spoke to, self-service network provisioning and reducing physical network complexity. The next one was enable multi-tenant and hosted environments, which I think is a very interesting one because we have some hosting that we do, but we also have customers who host for other businesses and other end users as well. This Jirah, you can jump through it too. This gives me the ability now to again establish those guardrails, which more importantly for this situation is to make it so that my two customers that I'm hosting can't see each other's networks and interact with each other's networks in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, if they can each say only NAT to the internet or NAT out to a DMZ, they not only can they not see each other, but it's also interesting to think about in my head, now that that network perimeter is a software object, well, now I can automate that, I can scan for it, I can sort of validate it over time, right? It's not like I call in the firewall guy once a month to make a change, and in the interim, I just hope no one else touches it, and therefore it can't change. I can sort of the first two, right, around self-service and reducing complexity and being able to automate stuff. Well, that even helps with my configuration management, right, and scanning and verifying that I don't have drift and re-verification of tenant isolation kind of stuff.
Right. So, the next one listed here is to create VPCs, which we kind of touched on. The VPCs are virtual private clouds, which overall, we spoke to it being an isolated network space. I liken it to a bubble, kind of, being able to take, Andy referred to being encapsulated, being able to put all of your stuff in a bubble and move it from one place to the other, which I think is very important, especially when it comes to things like actual cloud networking. Go ahead, Jirah. You
No, totally right. It's the exact same model, right? The same reason why public clouds adopted. You need this level of definability of how is your network going to look in the cloud. It makes sense, even to bring it on-prem as well. And I do like it does. The article does a better job defining it than either of us probably stumbled into, right? That what does it isolate? Routing tables, right? And it's your border for like where can I have, and therefore we're going to have overlapping subnets, right? If I need a conflicting subnet, bam, stamp out another VPC, right? So isolated network namespaces.
Yeah, that's a big point too, because I'm sure neither of you has ever run into a place where there were IP conflicts on the network.
That sounds horrible. That'd be terrible.
Yes, it actually is horrible. But being able to have virtual networks that have overlapping IPs because you have a virtual private cloud set up, I think is definitely a big advantage over having IP conflicts.
It did. I mean, it's a throwback to, it was basically my second job after college. And the place where we worked, it was a fantastic job. Love working there. One of the guys who had a laptop at the time, which was back then, not everybody had a laptop, would go, home every night with a laptop. His home router loved assigning his laptop the same IP address that our work Exchange server had on the LAN. So with the way, I forgot what version of Windows we were on back then, it was a long time ago, but every morning around, I don't know, let's say 8:30 for about 8 seconds, right? The switch said to figure out, wait, is that Exchange server over there in the cubicle farm? Oh wait, no, it's not. It's not. Take this other IP address and change that thing out, and now we're all back connected to Exchange again.
Oh my gosh.
It was always exciting.
That's terrible. Where I thought you were going when you started that was network and IP subnet managing by Excel spreadsheet. And oops, I forgot to update that.
I kind of wish we were past that one. That one's not so far in the rear window, unfortunately, for some things I take.
Yeah. Well, at least if they're using Nutanix flow networking, it'll all be in the same place and no spreadsheet to update, because this is where you do it.
Yeah, right?
This is our source of truth.
Yeah.
So the next bullet point was extending VPC functionality. This is speaking more to being able to utilize remote site-to-site VPNs and regulate traffic for those virtual networks according to your access control lists, ACLs, or redirecting policy secure traffic to certain VMs. Anything you want to hit on that one specifically?
No, just powerful capabilities, right? That people will need, right, to get this really implemented in production fashions, right? How do I connect this bubble to that one over there? How do I control what traffic can get in and out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that stands out to me is that we're down to functionality now that we can, set up VM specific routing policies. So you've got the ability to restrict or redirect traffic just down to the VM level, which I think is extremely helpful to try to make it. we used to have what we would call God mode, where you could get to anywhere on the network from this particular VM, but everything else was shut off from going from this place to this place. And the way that was done previously was a physical port. And you had to go to a physical port that was mapped or configured in a certain way. This is giving you the ability to do that out of a software-defined vehicle. So that also reads to me as, since you're doing it software-defined, you can do it on the fly if you need to.
Totally.
With great power, though, comes great expectations.
Nope, that for sure. Yeah, always.
So yeah, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, but you've at least got lots of possibilities from there. So enable your hybrid cloud is the next bullet point. We kind of talked through the abilities that you have out of using flow networking. And they talk, about AWS today and Azure being in development. What can you share with people about this one, Jirah?
I think the coolest takeaway from this outcome is where we highlight the consistency that it can enable, right? The way that there's completely valid reasons and ways to deploy, like, say, just Azure native VMs, just AWS VMs, and of course you could define security models and policies for each of those kinds of workloads or deployments. None of that would then be portable back to on-prem or vice versa, right? Whereas this is a huge benefit, right? From like, well, why would I want to run Nutanix VMs on-prem and Nutanix VMs on clusters on AWS and Nutanix VMs on clusters on Azure? Well, now I can both get it from the human level and the automation and monitoring level of that network policy, security policy consistency wherever I deploy, right? And that sort of that consistency, that repeatability is invaluable, right? To know that this is our policies that go around this kind of app. This is our policies that go around this kind of deployment or these kind of requirements. For a lot of regulated industries, that's killer. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big deal for me because I talk a lot all the time about flexibility, but to be able to have a set of, I keep going back to the guardrails, right? You have this set of guardrails that you're using. You have this configuration that you're using. To have that be valid on-prem is hard enough. To also have that in AWS or in Azure, in the public cloud, that's an entirely different animal. But then to couple that with the portability to do it in this place today and that place tomorrow and this place the next day, I think is amazing. I think that's a very big feature set that a lot of people will, start to be able to utilize and, see the definite pros and advantages to being able to do that.
No, completely.
Next bullet point was create IT automation. And this is just specifically talking around integrating simplified simplified workflows into everyday tasks like user onboarding, service chaining, and logging centralization. Andy, I'll let you hit that one since you love automation.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, this would be good automation, right? We set the table that way.
I like good automation. That's right, Jirah. If it's a good process, let's automate it. If it's a bad process, let's don't get hung up and automate it until it becomes a good process.
That's right.
There's so many parts of, like, could I think of a benefit to having like a subnet defined for every single developer so that each developer gets their own network sandbox? Absolutely. Would I want to do that on a physical switch? Maybe. Do I definitely want to do that with a virtual switch and software-defined networking? Absolutely, right? Like the user onboarding there just gave me that thought around new capabilities that we can take that are just so obviously beneficial compared to what I used to had to do in a physical switch world. That just unlocks so many more possibilities, right? And Andy already said, like, EUC is a great use case for this, right? Where, like, the workload itself, I think of EUC as like an inherently untrusted part of the environment, right? I want that nowhere near my servers, right? Unless I can monitor that traffic and control it. How do I get from my desktop to the server, right? Because that's the outside Wild West world, right? Running in my data center.
Yes.
It only makes sense to, put a fence around that.
Absolutely. The last bullet point here, which I think is also a very important one, is automatic disaster recovery, failover, and testing. And I whenever we start talking about DR failover or more specifically DR testing, I always ask the same question facetiously. You mean we're supposed to test this?
and doesn't it, like, I think this one really makes my imagination kind of run. It's like, well, what now? It becomes such it's so easy to imagine automated DR testing where, like, every night at 3 a.m. go create a bubble network and power on all these VMs, the latest copies you have, and then send me an email that it all works successfully. And I wake up every morning to my Good Morning Batman email that says DR test ran great last night,
which is just amazing, and
yeah,
all of the different ways that we can test DR, or that we used to have to test DR, and all of the different types of tests and all of the work and the planning that goes behind it. Here you are with the ability now to automatically have it go out and do it for you and just tell you whether or not it worked. And what didn't work or something didn't work.
In my mind, I think of a lot of this, with all respect to the Flow development team who did fantastic work here. It's almost like, in some ways, nothing here is net new. It's like everything is easier, right? Like, because like you go to a customer and it's like, let's do a DR test. How easily can we create a copy of your production subnet at the DR site? Oh, that's really, really hard to do, right? In a traditional network world. And with this, it's like, oh, click, Dex, done. What else can we do for you? It's so easy. And now I can do the really best kind of like DR test that like lets me write the best kind of report to the executives. Like, we've done a fantastic DR test. We really simulated a full failover and everything just worked,
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that goes under my category of Nutanix for your sanity. Because
I like that.
Because I mean, to your point, if you walked into a meeting room today and said, okay, we're going to do a DR test this weekend, like I can almost say positively 100% blood pressure is going to go up in that room. Because this is not something that has traditionally been easy. Therefore, because it has been easy, it is something that has not traditionally been completed. And it hasn't traditionally been very well planned for either. When we talk to customers about DR, normally we get, that, yes, I understand this is a necessity, but it's hard, or it's expensive, or I don't know, how to do these other things that the business people do that I've never seen, never done before. This takes a lot of that away. You've just got the ability now to you do have to still plan a little bit, but it's not as hard, it's not as much, and now you can actually go out there and actually run it and make sure that things are happening so that DR can be what it actually is for you, a place for you to recover from a disaster, not another disaster waiting for you.
Yeah. No, totally right. It's just it's such an enabler from like we can just do so many more things more easily now, right? Like your boardroom, hey, surprise, DR test this weekend statement was just it's so many companies, that's a lot of manpower, which means expensive, whether they're employees or contractors or professional services or anybody. That's an expensive statement. It's not trivial, right? But the more we can drive into something I can automate and script around, now ease of use goes way up, right? If it just happens every night while we sleep,
Absolutely.
and I get an alert when the DR test fails, like just a whole different world, right?
And that's another good point too. I won't belabor this much longer, but again, Nutanix for your sanity. You walk into a boardroom today and you talk about a DR test that happens this weekend. What's the first thing all the IT people are going to think? But besides, oh, holy crap, it's, man, I got to work this weekend.
Yeah.
And you got the ability now to just automate this, and you don't have to work this weekend unless it tells you something failed.
Yeah, and the interval between testing, right? Like if you met a company that did a real full on, like, we will light up a copy of our VMs in a prod subnet bubble at the DR site. If they did that like twice a year, you're like, okay, you're probably doing a pretty good job. Like, you're on top of things. That's
right.
Good governance, But now when you can move that from twice a year to every night, man, like, just now you're catching changes, in production that break the DR setup up to 6 months faster, right? That's a lot of value.
Up to 6 months faster, which sounds so funny because, the paradigm there is, oh, well, you're doing it twice a year. Oh, you're doing pretty good. Well, now it's, oh, well, you could have, in that twice a year, you could have done it 180 times.
Yeah, we're almost moving. What does good look like, right?
Right.
This is the new good. Yeah.
All right. So the last piece of the blog post here is the future of flow networking. They've got another wonderful, beautiful chart here for you to take a look at. But it's talking through some new capabilities that are in development. I'll just read through them. Stretch networks across 2 sites.
Yep.
Dynamic routing, eliminating the need for manual route configurations. That would be a big one. Transit VPCs and role-based access controls, which you always want.
Yep.
Jirah, any of those you want to speak to in any detail?
All this is being in development. Stretch networking, obvious benefits there. Dynamic routing, which is when you're not using the NAT, right? I want the physical network to know about the software-defined subnet and how do I get traffic into that. So that ability to do dynamic routing there versus static, which even static routing is automatable, but we know dynamic certainly is easier. Transit VPCs refers to that relationship of, okay, this subnet in this software-defined bubble, when it gets out to the real network, that connection goes to this site. And transit VPCs changes that paradigm to where now it can get out to this site or it can get out to that site and have more routing abilities, right? There's some good diagrams you can Google for to say, what is a transit VPC? And then, of course, RBAC, right? RBAC is fundamental to, enterprise security, right? And feature rollout so that we can say, yes, we can adopt this feature, but we also know people can have the right degree of control over their role of it, right? So encouraging that. I love when we write a blog post this way where we say, here's what's out and here's what's, also in the hopper.
So coming, yeah. So Andy, we rode Jirah for a long time for clusters on Azure, and he finally delivered. So you want to pick one of these that needs to be his priority?
I was so busy, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, clusters on Azure. No, I want it. I want it fully supported, ready to go. We got customers every day talking about it. No, okay.
I work on it every night from 11 to 11:30. I tell you, Andy.
Can I get 15 more minutes? I'll almost 15 more minutes. Hey, I do have a question.
Sure.
Did y'all talk about the fact that Jirah has a seatbelt on?
So
the mobile podcast studio today.
So we didn't. So we can just imagine that Jirah's a subnet and he's in his bubble right there.
Okay.
Well, for the record, right? The Nutanix Weekly Podcast is pro seatbelt. That's not the interesting part.
So I would like to also notate that yes, he does have a seatbelt on, but I can see the trees in his window are not moving or blurry, so that indicates no motion is happening right now.
I didn't know if you were going to put like a green screen behind him. There was going to be traffic going by, and he was like, it was like a shoot in a movie.
Yeah, like a 1950s movie. Yeah. Nope. We had a house showing get scheduled, and I was like, I thought for a minute, like, how far would I get if I was like, hey, honey, can we decline the showing? I have to go talk nerdy to my friends and record it for the internet to listen.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd get very far. So.
No, that would not happen. But although I do have to note, Jirah, you've taken this whole moving charade. You're taking it pretty far now. Now we're doing pretend showings and stuff like that.
Are you starting to believe me maybe a little bit?
Not yet. No.
Yeah, I think I mean every time somebody does this, I get reminded how good of a studio, like a sound studio, the inside of an automobile is.
Oh yeah,
especially a nice car. You sound great, man.
Glad it almost went undetected by the audience.
I was making the assumption it came up earlier, but I just couldn't resist.
I mean, we did talk about it right before we jumped on. I had other jokes for him since he was sitting in the car. But, yeah, it didn't come up. See, we have you, Andy.
from my car to yours, right? Where I listen to most of my podcasts.
Andy's making the real stuff happen. All right, that is so. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say that's all I had, but Jirah, as usual, how can the people try this?
I should actually know whether or not this is on our test drive site. I'm gonna go find out. Circle back, mention next week. But yeah, no, and as always, right? Reach out to your friendly XenTegra folks, your Nutanix folks, right? We'd love to show this to you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a piece of flow on test drive, but all of these features are not yet on test drive. But we can still, as Jirah said, we can work with you to get some hands-on experience. And speaking of hands-on experience, we do have our next monthly class coming up on December 1st. So guys, you can jump out to the XenTegra.com site and sign up for that under events. But if you guys want to have a hands-on flow class, we'd be happy to provide that for you too. So just let me know, reach out.
There we go.
Andy, any parting thoughts?
No, I just appreciate you guys letting me hop in late, and sorry about my flight being delayed and not going to catch a train, but always good to hear Jirah talk about what Nutanix has got going on. It never ends, and I'm always amazed at how up to speed he is on all of it.
We'll catch him slipping one day.
Jirah, good luck.
I'll be interested. Go ahead, Andy.
Are you sitting out like in the parking area near your house where you watch the people go in and out?
I asked him the same thing. I said, where you're parked, can you see your house?
I think my response was, dude, it's 2021. I get notifications when my front door keypad unlocks itself and my doorbell records audio and video. So I don't need to be like lurking around the corner anymore just to know when am I allowed to go home.
We had a strange situation about 2 years ago. We were looking at a house on Lake Norman, and the people were out in their pontoon boat in the middle of the cove watching us, and you realize that's who it was. And then I go to look around the dock down at the water, and all of a sudden I find a bee's nest, and I start getting stung by bees. I can only imagine what their reaction was.
Maybe they didn't want you to buy the house. They sent the bees to give you a sign, not this house.
I go running up the dock, swatting myself, yelling and screaming. They had to be like, "Oh, this sale's not going to happen."
Nice.
All right, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Talk to you all next week.
Talk to you next week.